In the world of academia, he is the most cited author alive. When you look at the all-time most quoted list, his name is up there with Plato, Freud, and the Bible. He's written well over 200 books, been translated in more than 50 languages. His name is Noam Chomsky, and he's my guest on this special edition of Inside USA. I'd like to start by talking about the presidential election campaign. In writing about the last election in 2004, you called America's system a fake democracy in which the public is hardly more than an irrelevant onlooker. And you've been arguing in your work in the last year or so that the candidates this time around are considerably to the right of public opinion on all major issues. So the question is, do Americans have any legitimate hope of change this time around? And what's the difference in dynamic between America's presidential cup 2008 versus 2004, 2000?
There are some differences, and the differences are quite enlightening, in fact. I should say, however, that I'm expressing a very conventional thought. So 80% of the population thinks that, read the words of the polls, that the government is run by a few big interests looking out for themselves, not for the population. 95% of the public thinks the government ought to pay some attention to public opinion, but doesn't. As far as the elections are concerned, I forget the exact figure, but I think by about 3 to 1, people wish that the elections were about issues, not marginal character, qualities and so on. Mm-hmm. So I'm right in the mainstream. It's not
as usual,
not an unusual position. That there is some interesting differences between 2004 and 2008, and they're very revealing. It's kind of striking that the commentators don't pick it up because it's so transparent. The main domestic issue for years, way at the top of the polls, decades in fact, is the health system, which is understandable. It's a total disaster. The last election debate in 2004 was on domestic issues. Late October 2004. And the New York Times the next day had an accurate description of it. It said that John Kerry did not bring up any hint of government involvement in health care because it has so little political support, just the large majority of the population. But what he meant is, and he's right, it was not supported by the pharmaceutical industry, it wasn't supported by the financial institutions and so on. All right, let's go to this election, 2008. This election, the Democratic candidates all have programs that are not what the public's asking for, but approaching it, and could even turn into it. So what happened between 2004 and 2008? It's not a shift in public opinion. That's the same as it was. Mm-hmm. What happened is that a big segment of American corporate power is being so harmed by the healthcare system that they want it changed, namely manufacturing industry. So, for example, General Motors says that it costs them, I think, maybe $1,500 more to produce a car in Detroit than right across the border in Windsor, Canada, just because they have a more sensible healthcare system there. Well, when a big segment of corporate America shifts its position, then it becomes politically possible and it has political support. So therefore, you can begin to talk about it.
But those aren't changes coming from pressure from below, you're saying?
The public is the same. It's been saying the same for decades. But the public is irrelevant, is understood to be irrelevant. What matters is a few big interests looking out for themselves, exactly what the public sees.
And yet you can see people agitating against the official story, even within the electoral process, where there is definitely a new mood in America and a restlessness among populations who are going to political rallies in unprecedented numbers. And what do you make of this well-branded phenomenon of hope, which is obviously part marketing, but is it not also part something else?
Well, that's Barack Obama. He has the way he presents himself, or his party handlers present him, is basically as a kind of a blank slate on which you can write whatever you like. And there are a few slogans: hope, unity,
change.
Change. Hope, unity, change. Now write down whatever you like there. And it does arouse enthusiasm, and you can understand why. And again, about like 80% of the population thinks the country's going the wrong way. It's been for most people in the United States, the last 30 years have been pretty grim. I mean, it's a rich country, so it's not like living in southern Africa, but for the majority of the population, real wages have either stagnated or declined for about 30 years. There's been growth, but the wealth is going into very few pockets. Benefits, which were never very great, have declined. Work hours have greatly increased. And there isn't anything much to show for it other than kind of, maybe staying afloat, and there is tremendous dissatisfaction with institutions. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Bush's very low poll ratings, which is correct, but people sometimes overlook the fact that Congress's poll ratings are even lower. In fact, all institutions almost all are not trusted and not disliked. There's a sense everything's going wrong. So when somebody says hope, change, unity, and kind of talks eloquently, and a nice looking guy, and so on, yeah, it's fine.
If the elite strategy for managing the electorate is to ignore the will of the people, as you interpret it through polling data, essentially, and to carry on with a constructed conversation, what is an actual progressive vision of changing the American electoral system? Is it election finance? Is it third-party activism?
Yeah, we have models right in front of us. Like, take, say, Bolivia, the poorest country in South America. I mean, they had a democratic election a couple of years ago, which you can't even dream of in the West. It's kind of interesting that it's not discussed. I mean, this is a real democratic election. The large majority of the population became organized and active for the first time in history, and elected someone from their own ranks on crucial issues, which they all knew about. Control of resources, cultural rights, issues of justice, really serious issues. And furthermore, they didn't just do it on election day, pushing a button. They've been struggling about these things for years. A couple of years before this, they managed to drive Bechtel and the World Bank out of the country when they were trying to privatize water. It was a pretty harsh struggle, a lot of people killed. Well, they reached a point where they finally could manifest this through the electoral system. They didn't have to change the electoral laws. They had to change the way the public acts. And that's the poorest country in South America. Actually, if we look at the poorest country in the hemisphere, Haiti, same thing happened in 1990. Well, if peasants in Bolivia and Haiti can do this, it's ridiculous to say that we can't.
As the conversation about U.S. politics inevitably draws us out to the rest of the world, let me just take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the rest of the world. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with more of my conversation with Noam Chomsky.